and welcome back to the No Score Review Show, where we have in-depth discussion and nuanced critiques of some of the latest movies, video games, and television. I am your host, Nick Green, and today we are talking TMNT Mutant Mayhem. And if you're watching the video version of this review, you might be able to tell that I am alone for this review. This is going to be a solo review. I wasn't able to schedule any guests in like I usually am for this movie review, but I wanted to do a review nonetheless as soon as I could. So I just decided to switch things up. Like I said, it'll be a shorter review, and I think I'm only going to keep it to spoiler free for this video. I might do a spoiler-free or a spoiler-filled review rather later on with at least one more guest, but that won't be until probably like later next week, depending on scheduling. I won't promise anything as of yet, but for now we'll just do this spoiler-free review. So going in to this movie, expectations-wise, I was pretty like low-key, I would say, when the trailers started coming out. Like, I think even before trailers came out, I didn't hear much about this. It wasn't really on my radar at all. I don't even think I remember hearing anything about a new Ninja Turtles movie coming out or being in the works. So once trailers started popping up, this was kind of a welcome surprise for me personally. The take on the Spider-Verse animation style definitely got me intrigued right off the bat. The tone was very evident from the get-go with these trailers. The like grungy hip-hop street hero story translated through the trailers really well, I found. So I was pretty excited, and the like marketing spin on it from like Seth Rogen and having the turtles actually be teenagers was very appealing. Teenage actors, at least. So yeah, I was very excited going into this. I wasn't expecting too much out of it. I was kind of keeping my expectations in terms of what the story would be or like the quality of the film fairly low, but I was excited to see more films in this animation style and genre come to life and be on the big screen. So yeah, I was very much looking forward to it, and I would say it met those expectations. I would say it the story overall is fairly simple and straightforward. Like it's pretty cut and dry. There are a couple sequences throughout the film that feel very basic in terms of its like plot movement and momentum. Like there's a sequence in the very beginning of the film where one of the characters, scientist, is like going through very basic dialogue of like why he's doing what he's doing and what he's creating and whatnot. And then there's a couple lines later on in the film where certain characters are giving out dialogue that feels very generic and very baseline. Like there's not a bunch of nuance to it really. So in terms of being like a kid's film, I guess it's easily digestible in that sense. And yeah, that's okay. But like there's not a ton of meat on the bones, I guess, so to speak, in terms of this plot and story. But what really worked for me were the turtles themselves, which I think would arguably be the most important part of this film. And it's weird to think about how we haven't had an iteration of the Ninja Turtles up until this point that focuses on the teenage aspect. They're always kind of more depicted as like older teens to like young adults, I would say. Now, mind you, I haven't seen all of the Ninja Turtles like media or read the comic books or anything like that or played the games. So I don't have a full breadth of knowledge of their depictions. But in terms of the stuff I am familiar with, I've never seen it quite like this. It is a refreshing take. The dynamic and rapport between the brothers, like the four turtles, is great. And having them being played by the teenage actors that voice their roles really, really worked for me. They do a really excellent job. And I found that they kind of translated what works so well for Spider-Man, especially when it's like Peter or Miles even depicted as like a younger Spider-Man or like starting out as Spider-Man and struggling with those very normal everyday struggles of like liking girls or fitting in at school, wanting people to like you, finding your interests, and like just becoming a more developed human being. I think they translated that really well, with giving that superhero spin, that works so well for Spider-Man and what makes Spider-Man so relatable. I think they translated that onto the Turtles excellently. A lot of the action in this film is really cool. Like the final act set piece is really awesome, but the standout for me was the middle section. Like I think it's about halfway through the film. There's like a montage sequence. I won't go into too much detail, but it's just edited really cool. The music, like editing along to the music that plays along, is really really fun, and the action is just really really cool. So that was definitely a highlight for me. And seeing the turtles like actually be like, they are young, like they are teenagers and still coming into their own as characters themselves, but they are like kick ass and they are ninjas. Like, and that's put on display very well throughout the film, I thought. As far as the animation goes, I mentioned earlier, it very much takes inspiration from the Spider-Verse films, but I think it does a great job of making it its own. Like, it's not just a copy paste of what made Spider-Verse great. I think they really hone in a unique and distinct style of their very own. It's much more grungy, and it's like they lean more into like the spray paint art style and like hard like lines, like oil paint feel aesthetic to it, and then they like increase that with the soundtrack as well. There's a lot of like hip hop and like a lot of lo-fi stuff too, so it's all a very cohesive tone, I would say, overall. And even the casting for this movie is great. Like, there's Ice Cube, there's a couple comedic performances with like Paul Rudd and Seth Rogen and John Cena as well. But yeah, I feel like the cohesion was there, and it stood on its own enough that I am happy to see that it's not just a recreation of the Spider-Verse animation style, which is great because you don't just want the same thing over and over again. You want variations here and there and iterations, making things different and unique, so it's not all the same. So overall, I think I would definitely recommend the new Ninja Turtles movie. It, if I were to compare it to the Spider Verse films, those are probably the closest related to this film. It's not quite as transcendent, I would say. It didn't quite like punch a hole through the industry norms of the time. Spider Verse had shaken up the industry, the animation industry, quite a lot, and is now where you're now seeing the result of that as well, with films like this one and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, taking a lot of inspiration from those films, and Mitchell's versus the Machines as well, which was a Netflix original animated film that the creators of this film, the writers, and I think the director, Jeff Rowe, if I'm correct, if I'm remembering correctly, uh, those guys worked on Mitchell's and the Machines, so they're jumping from that straight onto this, and it's their strong suit, clearly. So, but yeah, it's not quite the same heights that Spider Verse reached for me, but it's definitely a great, fun family action adventure film, and just another amazingly beautifully animated film with its own distinct, unique style as well, which I really appreciated, and something definitely worth going to see on the big screen because there's lots of action, lots of funny moments to enjoy with a crowd. So I would definitely recommend going to check it out in theaters. And yeah, I think that's what we're going to call this very short review, but that's just kind of the nature of it. It's a little bit more edited as well. It's not quite the norm for the format that I stick to, where it's the long, uncut, long format reviews with guests. So if everything goes well, I might do a spoiler review for Ninja Turtles sometime next week if this review comes out when I want it to during the release weekend. So yeah. please let me know what your thoughts were on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. If you've seen it already, you can comment down below, or you can find me on all the socials, and you can, I guess it's not Twitter anymore, so you can tag me on X, whatever the right terminology is for those socials nowadays. And speaking of plugs, you can stay tuned wherever you're listening to or watching this episode of the No Score Review Show. I recently did a spooky episode with Allison Broder from the Who's There podcast, horror podcast. We reviewed Talk to Me and Cobweb. Technically, we did a little mini review towards the end of that episode. So if you're wondering what those films were like, definitely go check those out. I have reviews for all of the big summer blockbuster hits: Barbie, Oppenheimer, Mission Impossible 7. Go check those out if you haven't already. Otherwise, you can find me on all the socials, like I mentioned. I'll do a quick plug for my Let's Play channel, No Score Plays, where I do indie game Let's Play content. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching and listening to this review. Also, let me know what you thought of the format. If you are interested in seeing more of this type of format going forward, I might try and just do these if I can't find other guests for the show, and just simply provide my thoughts on any movies, video games, or television I'm watching or playing at the time. And yeah, thanks again so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you in the next review. Bye-bye.